Good morning, Sprout viewers. This is Arthur Huxham, and this is sadly my last video diary here in Belgium, in Brussels. I want to apologise first of all for not doing the video diary on NATO and SHAPE the other day. As I'll explain later, I was pretty much filming the last bits and pieces around Brussels with interviews and shots around the city, but without further hesitation, let us get started on the recap of what happened within the last 2 days. So, 2 days ago, on the 16th of May, I was invited by representatives of SHAPE and NATO to come and visit them to interview them on the subject of the British referendum. So, first of all, that morning, I went to visit NATO first, and I met 3 British expats. The first one was Dr. Jerry Shea, who's very senior in NATO, and he's been involved in various incidents such as the bombing in the Balkans in the 1990s. He's been involved in various campaigns where NATO have been involved, such as Afghanistan, Syria, and so on and so forth. And then afterwards I went to interview a man called Ian Stallion, who used to work for the Royal Navy in submarines, and now he's a specialist within the nuclear program. Within the British military. And then my final candidate at NATO was a man called Paul King, who was a journalist who used to work for The Guardian. Then he went on to work around Europe, such as Spain and around Europe. And now he works for NATO, in charge of editing. So each of the 3 candidates I interviewed, each gave their own personal opinions about how would the European Union, the European referendum for that matter, affect Britain and its relationship towards NATO and European Union. And each of them had very interesting, some similar, some different answers, and it was really fascinating to get their perspectives of what would happen in terms of the impacts. And then afterwards I went to SHAPE, which is based in the south of Belgium, so I had to travel from Brussels all the way down to the south, which took me about 2 hours, and it was a very long journey, but I managed to get there in the end. And there I met again 3 more British expats. One of them who I got in touch first was an ex-defence political correspondent called Mark Laity, who spent many years working for the BBC, reporting in various conflicts throughout the last over 20 years or so, and now he works for SHAPE. And my second candidate who I spoke to was a general called Ian Woodley, who's now retired, and he gave his point of view on his reactions towards the EU referendum, and it was a very interesting discussion. I mean, obviously the opinions between NATO and SHAPE is pretty much divided, and each have their own sort of reasons why. So that was very interesting for me personally to understand why they have those opinions, why some are against and some are for leaving the European Union. And then my third candidate, she's originally from Wales, called, I can't remember her surname, but she's called Sia. She used to work in British politics abroad for many years, and now she works for SHAPE. And she gave a very strong argument on the subject of Obama's recent statements about encouraging the British voters to vote in the EU referendum and encouraging them to stay. And he gave a very strong and passionate argument against the whole Obama campaign of his visit to the UK, which was very interesting in terms of the project. So overall, each of the 6 experts have been very kind for giving me their time in terms of discussing their personal reasons why the EU referendum is a very serious issue at the moment, and what impact it would have between the 2 institutions. So that was, for me, an extraordinary journey, to put that easier. Then afterwards, yesterday, on the 18th of May, I went to interview a CEO of the British Chamber of Commerce in Belgium on the subject of the British economy, in terms of jobs, and it was that interview was very, very interesting in terms of how the British Chamber would adapt whatever the outcomes after the 23rd of June. And so far, it was a very, struggling for words, I'm sorry. It was a very fascinating conversation, really, about what will be the likely outcomes for the British economy, whether it would be disastrous or whether it would adapt in terms of making other trade deals. And what I discovered recently, one interesting fact during my interview, was that Belgium itself is Britain's 6th or 5th biggest trade partner. Obviously the EU is the biggest, then you have America, China, but Belgium alone is within the top 10. And that is really interesting, an interesting fact to find out. I mean, for someone who has lived for nearly 20 years in this country, and having discovered just recently the facts about that was very fascinating. And so afterwards, after my interview, he was my last candidate. So far, overall, within the last couple of days, I interviewed about 11 British expats who have all been very generous and very interesting to talk to. So I would like to say a massive thank you to each and every person for having me to talk to them on the subject of the European referendum. Now, next, within yesterday, of course, I went around to film the Royal Palace in Belgium, in the centre of Brussels, and during that incident, there was a lot of security, there was a lot of police and soldiers about, because little that I knew that there was a state visit from the King or the Prince of Jordan, which was very, very interesting, but also scary at the same time, because as I was walking around the city, I was carrying obviously my gear, my camera, the tripod, and a lot of the police were giving me a very suspicious and careful look. So I realised that there was no way I could take out the video camera to do the shots I wanted to. So sadly, I had to resort to use my mobile phone, which all the footage from there will be used for the documentary for Britain's relationship with Europe. So now, sadly, in an hour's time, I will be departing to Gare de Midi, the main station in Brussels, to return to Cardiff. So, as I said, sadly, this is my final video diary here in Belgium, and it has been an amazing experience. I mean, what I've learned so far in the last 7 days, which I never thought this project, to be honest, could be so overwhelmingly fascinating, really, and I'm quite happy that I've decided to take upon myself to come here. Now, lastly, I would like to say thank you to Promo Cymru for supporting me with this project. They've been very kind and very generous with the equipment that they provide me for filming. And yeah, eventually, I mean, for the readers of the Sprout magazine, so what's going to happen when I return to Cardiff is I will be writing up all the interviews that will be published, and all the audio and film content of the interviews of the British expats will be attached to the article. So within the course of the next few days, they'll be broadcasted live on the Sprout website. And in terms of the film documentary, that will, it's nearly finished, but I still need to wrap up the filming in Cardiff Bay, which is the last film location I need to do. And once that's done, it will be the editing process, and then, of course, after the editing, we still don't have a date when it's going to be released, but I will keep you posted via Facebook, obviously, where the Sprout magazine communicates with its readers about when it's going to be broadcasted. I'm Arthur Huxham, signing out for the last time. Thank you very much.